my background, this is home. I actually grew up down the street here in Northampton and Phoebus. Born and raised here. I'm a Bruin. I'm sorry for those that really care about that. That's my background. I went to Old Dominion University right out of Hampton here. Stayed around local and started with the city in 2005. So I've been here 18 years now with the city under neighborhoods. Really started that work for about 8 years coaching neighborhoods, and then been division manager for the last 10. So that's really where I got to dive. I was doing a little bit of work early on with housing under the neighborhood work, but really dove headfirst now that I've been the division manager here. I've learned a lot. I'm still learning. I didn't know about your group. I'm still learning about who's out there really doing this work and who are the potential partners. I'll share my question at the end first because I want you to be thinking about it as I go through this. We are always looking for ways to do better as a city. So if you've got ideas that you say, if we just did this, and you got to get it off your chest tonight, tell me. So, and if there's a way that you think you can partner with us as a city to do better, because again, we're at the end of the day, yes, it's about money, it's about markets, but for us, it's about a better city. And so a better city, it makes your investment better at the end of the day. So if there's ways that you think you can partner with us as a city, please let me know. And so that's my 2 questions at the end. So be thinking about it as we go through this. Excuse me. So if you can click for me. Yep. I'm going to give you an overview a little bit tonight. I'm not going to get into short-term rentals. So if you came tonight to talk about short-term rentals, I will touch on it briefly. I will send you to the website. That's my easiest way to get information. I did mention to Stuart, I've got some other folks. If you all have specific interest, we can. I know our staff are always willing to come out and share information. Our zoning administrator, our planning administrator, our director can come out and share a little bit more about the short-term rentals and what that system is. Our property maintenance staff, we talked about some trainings and things that we do. They can come out and give some small conversations around property maintenance, or our permit staff, any of those that you feel are important to the work that you're doing. They're always glad to come out. So I think that's something to look at in the future. I don't want to take all your meetings with city staff, but they're always willing to engage and share and learn from you all. So please let us know if there's specific topics. So tonight I'm going to start kind of with the big picture as a city and give a little bit of history, and then get down in some examples of programs and projects that Kim heard originally on when I was speaking at VPAR. And then I'm going to talk a little about big picture again, kind of long range and what we're thinking going forward. So as a city, everyone knows Hampton broadly. These areas, as a city, we've been doing what we call strategic planning in master plan areas since the early 2000s. As a city, we've been doing neighborhood planning for years. When I can go in my office now and pull out old plans from neighborhoods from the 70s, the 60s, where we were doing neighborhood area planning. But we really focused our master plans. These are really comprehensive plans for areas of the city back in the early 2000s. So from about 2002 to 2006, these 6 plans were drafted and adopted by the city council. So these are policy documents that the council looks at. So when plans come through for development, they're looking at the master plan to see, does it align with the policy that we have? Most of these areas, you'll see they're a little bit different. Fort Monroe is in there. That's not city property, it's state held property, but there is a master plan for Fort Monroe. So I include that as kind of our 7th area because it's important to our city. So our 6 areas are Coliseum, downtown Buckrow, North King Street corridor, Kecoughtan corridor, and Phoebus. And so those are really our 6 areas. You'll see that a couple of these, the 3, at least downtown, Phoebus and Coliseum, are really urban areas. These are more built out environments, more commercial cores. These are what we call urban development areas. So these are areas that we are focused on growth. We're hoping to go build more density. We're hoping to build more concentration, because when we have more density, we're able to get more commercial. We're able to get the grocery store in downtown that we've been hoping for. We've been able to get some of those neighborhood support, commercial supports within those areas. So those are really what we call urban development areas. And then we also have our corridors. I mentioned Kecoughtan corridor and North King Street corridor. Those areas are really looking at those roads in particular and some of the surrounding neighborhoods. So that really was looking at what's the streetscape look like? How do we reinvest in some of these areas? And a lot of it was when we had commercial back in the day that was scattered all throughout these neighborhoods, where every corner had a different business or a different shop. That's not how commercial works anymore. And so really, how do we invest in these areas where they had a lot of vacant commercial spaces and really reestablish the neighborhood boulevard? So that was really our Kecoughtan and our North King Street. And then Buckrow. Most people know Buckrow. It's the tourism core of Hampton. It's the bayfront that we have there that's an amazing asset to our city. That really has a different blend of how do we maintain a neighborhood feel, but also generate tourism opportunities here. And so that one's been, it's not an urban core area, but it is a growth area in some way, particularly around tourism. So those are the 6 master plan areas. I'll talk a little bit more about some projects within each of those areas, but that really set the tone for the investment that we've been doing over the last 25 years. We've done some updates to those plans. So Phoebus, downtown, and Coliseum have all been updated since as late as 2017. We started doing some comprehensive planning back in 2019, hoping that we would get that all done, and then COVID happened. So we've been a little delayed in getting back into our master plan updates, but our hope is to do that in the next couple of years. If you could just click for me. So I just mentioned past efforts when it comes to housing and neighborhoods. I mentioned we've been doing a lot of neighborhood planning over the years. I mentioned a few of those that we've continued to work in as neighborhood plans. But a lot of our effort early on was to focus on stabilizing, preserving, and reinvesting. I grew up in Hampton. I mentioned that. So I knew my neighborhoods a lot. I've been through a lot of neighborhoods in Hampton. The neighborhoods that we had in the 80s and 90s are not the same neighborhoods that we have today. A lot of good things have continued on, and a lot of the challenges have gone away. And so our role has really been how do we make sure we continue to preserve, stabilize, and reinvest in our neighborhoods to make places that people want to continue to invest in. So our housing resources, I just share this because many times people think we just have money coming all over the place. We really don't. We have some federal money that my office manages around affordable housing that HUD allocates to us each year. We have some physical grant programs that we do for housing that we use our housing authority for. They're the ones who actually implement those programs for us. And our council, for our council minded folks here, have been really great. And I'm just saying because she's here, but they've been really great to invest in those programs and put money aside at the local level, because the federal money only goes but so far and has lots. If you ever invested in a federal or been a part of a federal program, there's a lot of regulations around that and restrictions, whereas the city funds are a lot more freer, can go to a lot more areas, and we have a lot more ability to tailor it to the neighborhood where we're at. So we've been using what we call curb appeal grants, or I'll talk about the newest version of that program now in a moment. We've also been doing redevelopment activities, so acquiring blighted properties. I'll mention this in Old Hampton in a moment, but how do we acquire blighted properties, assemble properties, so that we can put it back on the market and make it useful in the community. And then lastly, infrastructure. This is probably the one that has the broadest set of opportunities. I will mention a little bit more of ways we're using some of that new opportunities around infrastructure, but obviously there's city funds for infrastructure. That's our big capital projects. We also get money from VDOT for cost share for new roads and some paving opportunities. We also reach out to the federal funds to do for federal grants around transportation and infrastructure. And then most recently, we actually just put in a grant application with the EPA for a $20 million resiliency project. So these are all ways we're seeking funds in other avenues beyond just the city to address some of the infrastructure needs. And then when it comes to tools for neighborhoods, we've done everything from architectural assistance for homeowners and investors in neighborhoods. We've done guides on curb appeal, housing guides. We're working on plan books, which I'll talk about in a minute. We've also done a lot of education. Stuart asked earlier, Codes Academy is one that we've done. We've done a neighborhood college. We've done a realtor's college. So we've had a range of education opportunities, both for professionals and for residents within the community to know what's going on and how they can be more engaged. With our some of the programs that we've had in the past, I'm going to dive a little deeper into Housing Venture in a moment. But Sold on Hampton was an initiative we did early, right before 2008, right before the great housing market. We started this Sold on Hampton initiative to show what Hampton could be and how to reinvest in Hampton. That led to a preferred realtor program where we were training realtors how to sell Hampton better. We learned a lot from that. And those education opportunities really were helpful in doing that. But that's some of the things we've continued on and learned from, and some of those things we've faded out. So we can go to the next. I do want to mention resiliency. I mentioned new kinds of funding coming in for investment, and I'll start getting into some specific projects in a minute. But about 10 years ago, we participated in an effort with Norfolk called the Dutch Dialogues. And this was looking at, Norfolk had brought in some folks from the Netherlands to look at how they deal with water, how they engineer around water, and how we could apply some of those principles. So the Dutch dialogues led us to look at water differently. So how we treat stormwater and runoff and tidal flooding, how do we address those things is not just about the water itself, it's how do we create multiple benefits for how we address that water. So how are we living with water, essentially. And so with these plans, we have a citywide plan that kind of sets the principles. And in the last 3-4 years, we've been developing some very specific plans. So these are watershed studies or water plans. The first one was Newmarket Creek, and I'll mention projects in a minute from that, but that really focused on the northwest side of the city. This past fall, council adopted the downtown Hampton, Phoebus, and Buckrow water plan, so kind of the north or southeast side of the city. Our next one that we're looking at this year, coming up in the next year, is going to be our Back River, Fox Hill, Grandview area, which will be the northeast side of the city. And eventually we'll get down to the northwest side of the city. But these are really looking at these 4 areas as how do we address water? What are the main risk areas? What are the main opportunities here? Where do we grow? Where do we densify our development within those areas? Next slide. So when I mentioned projects coming out of that, so Hampton, because of that work that we were doing with the water planning and really being innovative in addressing these aggressively, and how we mitigate flooding and so forth, we are one of the first localities in Virginia to be awarded an environmental impact bond, which means we have a bond financing for at least 3 projects up here I'll mention that we're being held to impacts. So we have to report our impacts of those projects as we move forward. 2 of them under construction now. 1 is about to be under construction. And so the 2 that we see here, the 3 that got funded through environmental impact bonds, the first one is the Big Bethel Blueway, which is, having grown up in Northampton, I'm very familiar with the ditch that runs behind the houses, that runs all the way down to Newmarket Creek. And if you're familiar with Hampton, Newmarket Creek it separates the north and the south of the city and runs all the way over to Back River. So it's this huge area that's gathering all the rainwater, but also backs up with tide water as the tides come in. And so the water is nowhere to go. So what we need to try to do on the upper areas of the land is catch and store the water and slow it down so it doesn't get all down to the creek all at one time and create flooding down in the lower part of the creek. So Big Bethel Blueway is grading that ditch better, adding some activities to that area so it becomes an active public space. So we're creating a trail system now in that waterway area. So that's one of the big projects coming forward. Another one is the North Armstead and road raising and the Lake Hampton. So Lake Hampton is an old borrow pit that's over there by the Home Depot. You probably didn't even notice it was there. You just see something off to the side. It's this nice borrow pit that's there. It's a public amenity that we're trying to make it. So it's going to be a park area. It wasn't really functioning as a stormwater facility, so they've been working on that to make it a more functional facility so it doesn't flood. When you're trying to hold water, it doesn't help when it's flooding by the tide, so they're working on that now. As well as North Armstead Avenue road raising. So if you know, we call it sunny day flooding. As we see more sunny day flooding where there's no rain, but the road is flooded because the tide is so high, Armstead Avenue is one of those. And so that side of the road is going to be raised with some water storage, trail system that's going to connect to Hampton River and our waterway trail, as well as creating a new roadway for the city. So these are 3 projects that are underway right now. And the reason why I'm telling you these, because these are things that we're hoping not just to be an impact, okay, we saved the water, we mitigated some things, but we're really creating areas of interest, right? Areas that I would tell you, again, kind of growing up in Northampton, the Big Bethel Blueway, I was like, can we extend it all the way up? Because people walk that area already. But if we could make it a trail system and I can ride my bike from one end of the city to the other, or I can walk that way, you're creating amenities that people want to invest in. And so those are the things that we're able to do that. We're able to do that with the EIB as well as stormwater funds to help to offset some of that cost and commitment that the city has to pay. So that's 3 that are happening now. We also, again, you'll see up here, there's a whole set of trail systems that the city has continued to invest in and look for grants to fund, whether it's the Birthplace of America Trail, which I think has just changed names. I forget the name of it right this second, but that's a trail that runs all the way up the peninsula. But that's a trail system that Newport News has already funded on their side of the city line along Kickotan Road. And that'll be another trail that runs all the way down to Fort Monroe. The Billy Woods Canal that's up there by north of Hampton Center Parkway, so creating a trail system up there. The water walk is another one that we just did. So you'll see these trail systems that we're trying to connect pedestrian activity, create a more outdoor environment opportunity for our Hampton residents. Next slide. I mentioned downtown Phoebus and Buckner. I did want to mention this one because it's the most recent. This one has kind of a project in each of those areas that we've been focused on. The first one that's, there's some smaller projects that are already underway, like the Mill Point's living shoreline. So if you've been down to Phoebus and the waterfront in Phoebus, you'll see the living shoreline that was installed by the Phoebus Partnership. This would be a living shoreline that would run around Mill Point there. And then what that does is create a more vegetative buffer for how when the water comes up, it's a barrier for some of the wave action and those kind of things, helping protect the land that's there. Sorry. So that's one of the small projects underway. We are also looking at what we call the downtown defense effort. So raising some of the roads in some of those areas to create more of a protected core within downtown. So that's a project that's been proposed in that. All of these are on the website. If you want to dive in and see each project and some of the concepts and renderings for each of these, feel free to visit hampton.gov and Resilient Hampton. Phoebus has a green street for melons, so improving melons so that it can store water and create a more even enhanced melon beyond what it is now. And then the last one is really around Long Creek, which is up there in Buckrow. So if you know First Street, Fifth Street, flooding over in that area, it would be a raising of First Street to kind of stop the flooding waters from coming in, creating a tide gate that's up there, and that's really protecting all of the neighborhood that's behind it from a lot of the tidal flooding. So those are the big projects that are coming out. There's some smaller ones in that area too that give some guidance. But that's what our water resiliency team is working on now, is finding grant funding for these and moving forward with these projects. Yep. All right, housing venture, which is probably what some of y'all are more interested in than the water and the infrastructure things. So back in 2003, we started a housing venture initiative, and that was really around how do we focus on, we can we've got 60,000 housing units in Hampton. And if I were to spread our dollars out as federal dollars and others across the city, they wouldn't go very far. And we may fix a few houses up here and there, but we're not going to have an impact that's really going to change the nature of that community or really spark further investment in there. And so we started back in 2003 adopting housing venture areas. And these are a concentration of our federal funds, because our federal funds are required to be in certain areas. We have to designate those areas. And then it also was layering in city funds, public investment dollars, whether it was facilities or our grant programs. It was focusing in these concentrated areas. And these started with neighborhood conversations. We didn't just go in there and say, well, this is how we're going to fix it. It really started with developing plans with neighborhoods. So we're doing investment on one side, they're investing in the people on the other. So they're doing neighborhood watch organizations. They're building community activities and events within their neighborhood. And so these two areas were critical to our start. You'll recognize, hopefully, Old Hampton. It's been a long time of work, a lot of work in that neighborhood. We're finally, I think, getting to the end of a lot of that work in that neighborhood. A lot of the work came around buying a lot of what you all are doing, buying property that was blighted, buying property that was declared a public nuisance, that was on the market that wasn't selling, that we could purchase up, put some extra dollars in, and get it back on the market for a homeowner. And so our housing authority really led that initiative early on. We'd buy a tax auction or wherever we could, or maybe find parcels that we had to put together. We may have one parcel, we'd go to the tax auction and try to buy the other and make a whole parcel that's buildable. So through that work, we've been able to see reinvestment in those areas. I'll mention Sussex real quick. Sussex was our last one. We've essentially transitioned out of Sussex because you all and us have done a really great job in that neighborhood. It's really stabilized in a lot of ways. That neighborhood was built with old duplexes, but I think all but one had been converted into a single family neighborhood. They were over under duplexes, 3 different designs. We did a lot of curb appeal grants in that neighborhood, bought and rehabbed some of those homes early on. But that was our third neighborhood we went in. And then our most recent one right before COVID was Old Northampton and Phoebus. And we haven't really done a whole lot. We've done a few programs here and there, but we're hoping to get back into that as I talk about our last program that's really going to impact those. Next slide. Old Hampton, I'll mention some of the benefits and progress in this. So Old Hampton, when I first started working with the housing side of Old Hampton, we were buying homes 5 or 6 years ago in the 60 to 80,000 range for some, and that was kind of the average sales price in Old Hampton. If you remember, Old Hampton sits right between what was Harbor Square and Lincoln Park, so it had a lot of challenges around it, and then the neighborhood was right in the middle. I had a neighborhood center that was aging. We ended up closing the Old Hampton Community Center because it was built in the 60s, I think, late 60s, early 70s, and needed a lot of reinvestment, a lot of repairs. It was not aging well, and so we ended up closing that, creating a temporary space for the neighborhood to meet in and gather and be connected in. But we've seen a lot of reinvestment that we've been doing in there, adding in new streets, new street connections, so McAllister, Patterson, as well as buying up properties and assembling. So on the bottom here is one of our Old Hampton houses that's built by the Housing Authority. So they were buying houses, building new, or buying properties, building new, and then getting affordable buyers into those homes. So this was early on in the process. We went from about 80,000. Then it was about 150,000, then it was about 260,000, and then the real market hit. And so now we're hitting one of the rehabs that we actually looked at, I think recently sold last year for 360, that we were going to buy but didn't. But one of you all, someone else did a great job of rehabbing that and putting it back in the market. And so we've got a few properties left in that area, right around Queen Street and Back River. And then we've been working with the neighborhood around the Old Hampton Neighborhood Center, Community Center, sorry, to get a plan for that area. This area was, if you don't know, I'll give a quick history on Old Hampton because I do think it's powerful. This was settled by freedmen who were former slaves from the Civil War that had settled in downtown, because Fort Monroe and that whole opportunity as a freedom's fortress. They settled in downtown. Union soldiers thought they were building great houses, acquired the houses and moved them out by force. And so this is the neighborhood where the freedmen settled, just across the street. So we've got a cemetery in the neighborhood that dates back into the middle 1800s. So it's a neighborhood that's really historic black neighborhood, really got a lot of pride and a lot of opportunity there. And when we got to urban renewal in the 70s, we took some areas, the blocks of neighborhood in here. Nobody in the room was on council at the time that did that, so I'm not speaking bad about anybody, but they made decisions to acquire large blocks of land and created a park that really didn't have any eyes on it. And it created a lot of problems over the years, homelessness, drugs, activities, because nobody had ownership of that area from a visibility perspective. And so we've been working with the neighborhood for the last 5 years, 6 years now, probably 7, dating myself for a while, to look at how do we redo that community center. Now the new Mary Jackson Neighborhood Center sits there. Now there's a road going in that we got VDOT funds to support to reconnect Grant Street back from Armstead over to Grant Circle. And that's eventually going to be another 25 homes within that block as well. So we're trying to redo some of the things that had happened in the past to really create a neighborhood again, and set that neighborhood off to one last good push. So that's just my little history on Old Hampton. Pastor Point, some of the homes you can see up there on the top picture is from Creek Street that the Housing Authority worked with some of our preferred builders. So the Housing Authority was building. We've given some properties to Habitat for Humanity to build some affordable homes. And then we also had a preferred builder program. So someone mentioned, I don't know if you said it earlier on, we had a dollar lot program. We had some properties we purchased a long time ago that HUD required us to offload. So we created this program that if they were building an affordable home for affordable homeowners, they could get the lot for $1. And so we saw a lot of good progress, a lot of good early investment in that work. And then as we realized we needed some mixed income homes at the time, we created a program called the Preferred Builder Program, where if you couldn't build for an affordable homeowner, you wanted to go market rate, as we call it, you could pay 10% of the final sale price for the land. So if you were selling the home for $250,000, you'd pay us $25,000 for the land. And so that created a predictable cost for builders in the time. unfortunately, we're out of land. We did a really good job in the last several years doing this. So we're working on some areas in the back of Pasture Point and some other spaces to create more land with infrastructure funds so that we've got more lots to put out on the market. So stay tuned. If you're interested in being a preferred builder in the future, we're working on redoing that program as well while we have kind of this space with our housing authority. Please reach out to our housing authority. They'd be a great one to be on the list for when that does open up again. But we've seen some, our curb appeal grants, as I mentioned, we've given out over since 2004 when it started, 2005. We gave out over 500 grants. And we're seeing, it was a one-to-one match, and we saw people give 60% more than that into their home. It's a $5,000 grant, and they were putting way more money into it with just that incentive. So it was a great return on investment for the city to spur that investment on. Next. I do want to give a little bit of data because I think this is interesting. I've been, my day job, my other day jobs have not given me a lot of time to go back into the data a lot as I like. But a lot of times we talk about housing in Hampton and we think, oh, there's so much rental. And there's really not when it comes to single family. Some of you already know this, so this is not new to you all. But just looking at our census data, when we break it down to ownership in single family, in 2017, actually 2020, I gave a council update, and we used the 2017 data, and this is what I shared. 74% of our single family is homeowner occupied. So in our challenged neighborhoods, we're seeing about 50% ownership. So there's a higher concentration in some areas than others, but 75% roughly is homeowner occupied in 2017. And you can see our ownership for our multifamily is low. We don't have a lot of condos in our city. We didn't make that market timing, I guess, in our development history. We don't have as much beachfront property that's privatized that has that same demand. But you can see the regional percentages on the right side, and a lot of that's driven by Virginia Beach. So if you kind of take Virginia Beach out, we have a lot of composition that's similar to Virginia Beach, but also to Portsmouth. We're somewhere in between when it comes to this breakdown. Get the next slide. This is 2022 data, which I thought was really impactful. So we went from 60,000 units to 62,000 units after this last census. So we've increased our units within the city. We've also decreased our unoccupied units. So while we've gone up, we've also increased more occupied units than what we had previously. So that percentage is shrinking. And our ownership has gone up. So we're seeing even less rental in our single family. So when we think about Hampton, we often, I think of folks that don't live in Hampton or haven't been in Hampton a long time, usually have negative perceptions. And even internally we do. We think bad about our city. Oh, there's rentals everywhere I turn. There's really not. When we think about there's specific neighborhoods that may have more than others, and our goal is to try to create that better balance and increase home ownership in those neighborhoods. So, and we typically are looking for a 60% ownership is what we call healthy. And so we look at Hampton overall at 80% is a pretty healthy percentage of ownership. And we like our renters. We see on the bottom where our renter percentage is growing. We've increased our multifamily. We've talked about that a lot. Increased a lot more apartments. Constellation, Arrow, a lot of the other ones that we've seen across the city, both affordable and market rate. But we know that ownership brings that investment, as you know. There's good owners and there's bad owners, but we know that there's a little more stability for a neighborhood when they have a high ownership rate. Next. So I'll just share real quick the challenges and opportunities that we see, and I'll share the urban core because it's different kind of than most of our single family neighborhoods. Infrastructure is a big one. I was just talking to Councilwoman Harper earlier that infrastructure is a challenge because I'll speak, if I was an elected official, it'd be hard for me to put money into a parking garage or stormwater improvements or wastewater improvements that I'm not going to see a building on in 5 years or 10 years. It's a risk in that sense because especially from I'm not elected, so I can speak this. I don't have to get elected every 4 years, and so to say I got to do something I'm not going to see a result in for 5 to 10 years is tough. But that's what a lot of our other cities have done. They focused on infrastructure first, and then development is followed. And so some of our urban areas are really looking at what is the most smart risk mitigating investment that we can make in our urban cores, our downtown, Coliseum, and Phoebus, to really bring that critical mass of development. So downtown, for instance, I mentioned our last master plan update. said we needed 5,000 units to really have a thriving downtown for commercial, for residential activities, for infrastructure, to maintain transportation and so forth. We're about at 1,500 right now with the new constellation. So how do we continue to add another 3,000 to 4,000 units in downtown? There's only one way. It's up. You can't go out. So how do you increase your density in a smart way? And we got to do that in a way that doesn't change the character of our community either. And so we really have to be strategic in that and financially smart in that as well. So that's a big challenge for us. I mentioned critical mass and capacity. Like what is the market for Hampton? I think every multifamily developer that I know of that's new, especially in the city, has a wait list or is at high capacity. They're at 80, they're 90 to 95% capacity or more. So the demand is there. But what we want to make sure that we're not overbuilding our city, hoping that the capacity is going to continue to be there. It's been shared publicly. The Navy just shared a few weeks ago, or a month ago, that they're looking for another 1,500 units for Navy on the peninsula. We know our Air Force is continuing to expand its mission. That's another 1,000 to 2,000 personnel in the next 3 to 5 years. So there's going to be demand. We know. How are we going to meet that? Some of that we can't meet alone, obviously, in Hampton. It's going to have to be a regional approach. But capacity is going to be important. But there's a lot of opportunity. So I just share this. We talk a lot of times about challenges. We've got a lot of land that Hampton has really been fortunate and smart about assembling. So we've got interest in all of those, and part of it's trying to see how quickly can we get those moving and get the right decisions on those properties. We know the demand's there, and we know we're central. I was talking to somebody earlier, where we live is central. We can get anywhere, right? And we see that interest around the interstate. I know there's a lot of speculation, but when the interstate's done with the tunnel, it's been seen when major infrastructure projects like that happen, greater demand happens. If I can then get back to Norfolk really easy and I can live in downtown Hampton or Phoebus or Coliseum, I'm going to do that. And so we're going to see demand in the future is our hope. So our location is a great blessing. It's also a challenge because we don't have a lot of land to deal with. So when we get to infill, a lot of our work is really trying to make sure that like I mentioned, we don't have a lot of land that we control. We're hoping that you all can do some of this as partners down the road in improving this, but quality has been a challenge. We are working now to do an infill plan book. So a lot of lots that we have are substandard. Zoning doesn't allow them to be built on. They don't fit right. They may be too short or too wide. They don't, so we're working now with a consultant. We just got them under contract a couple months ago to design an infill plan book. Norfolk did this really well in one of their neighborhoods, but it's off-the-shelf architectural plans that you can customize. We have some different options along those lines that you can go and build that's already pre-approved by zoning for those size lots. So that will hopefully also help spur our infill development, because what we're looking for is quality that's going to last. Some of y'all build in quality. I don't want to shade anybody's quality that they build, but I want neighborhoods that are going to last 20, 30 years. We go back there and say, hey, we don't got to tear any of these down. These are great houses. So we're really trying to make sure that we're keeping that quality in a sustainable way. We have a lot of good, complete neighborhoods. That's our good strength. When we're looking for our infill housing, we're not seeing large blocks and tracts of vacancies. We have some really good, complete neighborhoods. We have complete streets and infrastructure. So a lot of this infill is just putting in the house and that development. And again, I mentioned the ownership. That's a big positive for this. A lot of this infill, the risk is very limited because you've got good neighborhoods that are around them. And then lastly, I kind of talk about the neighborhood investment broadly. You don't just buy the house, you buy the place you live in. And so we're looking at, we do have older housing than the rest of the region. It's about 10 years older on average than the rest of our neighbors who are able to build in a lot of vacant farmlands and things and be able to expand. We don't have that ability. Our needs outpass our dollars. So we're always looking for other funds to help reinvest for those that are able to, and those that aren't able to. And then lastly, our infrastructure. I mentioned a lot of the resiliency work is to build infrastructure projects that enhance the quality of life for residents. And we've got a lot of benefits, and I won't go over those, but keep going. So let me talk about one program in particular, our model block program. I mentioned our housing venture work and what we did there. that was kind of our learning ground. We did a lot of projects there and efforts that helped us learn about what we should be doing and ways we can improve those programs. So if you can go to the next slide. So we've been asked to look at, initially we're looking at Fordham alone, and we had our housing venture Old Northampton as two areas that we said are really an opportunity to do this. And our model block program looks at post-war housing, so housing built kind of between the 50s and 60s. Generally where there's more of a kind of a tract home design in those times where we don't have to do a whole lot of variation, but needs investment. It's an area that typically doesn't, people aren't investing in. They're investing some, but they're not going to the next level. We're not seeing innovation in those areas when it comes to housing. We're seeing some of the basic turnover. And so how do we kind of bring those neighborhoods to the next level? And so Fordham and Old Hampton were two that were selected. Fordham, if you know where that's at, is Shelton Road, Old Buckrow, Pembroke, and then Ford on the far side. And then if you know Old Northampton, that's over behind the Langley Square Shopping Center, so easterly, or down to West Avenue, Rip Rap Road, over to Bethel Avenue. Or Green Street, sorry. And so we've really looked at how do we make that a model block. So we're focusing on, can we find one area within there we can acquire some homes, rehab them, and show what's possible. So you kind of mentioned a parade of homes is new construction. This is the parade of homes for the existing neighborhood. And how do we do that in a way to show some variations, bring in some partners that can show how to do that, and really how to make it happen for the residents around them. So we've been buying up in Smiley and on Bethel Avenue are kind of our two blocks that we're focusing on in those two neighborhoods. We've currently purchased 4 on Smiley. Whoever it was in the room that bought the one next to us, thank you, because we bought one, cleaned up the front yard, and the next house got rehabbed in 2 months, and it was amazing. I was like, I took it as success. We bought one house and we already flipped one. We didn't even do it. But we've got 4 in Smiley. We're working on a basic renovation, just rehabbing the existing envelope of the home, maybe updating, the interior. It's a gut, but we're updating all the interior of it. We're doing some exterior finishes, doing some things that are going to address the longevity of the home and look at the resiliency aspects. So we're extending the eaves on the home. We're doing some landscaping that's more resilient, some hardier landscaping around it, trying to get the water off the slab foundations, those kind of things. And then the other, one of the next ones we're doing is an upward renovation. So we've got some homes in the neighborhood have gone up to add additional square footage. So we're doing a model upward renovation to show what it could look like on a positive way. And then there's the one we bought, we hoped we could get to, but the termites and the water got to it first, as y'all know happens. And so we had to tear that one down. We're working on a new construction. So this is kind of an area we didn't expect to go in, but we're doing a new model home in the neighborhood. So we're really trying to fit it in the character of the neighborhood and fit something within to that smaller lot. So we're excited about that. The first one's been permitted, the second one's in the permitting process. The third one we're working on final designs. And the last one we just bought is going to be more of a agent space. So we're going to add an addition on the back. So you have 4 different options for how additions and renovations can happen within the neighborhood. We hope to have them for about 3 years, use them as teaching homes. We're going to have our architect is on contract to actually assist homeowners in the neighborhood, or you all that are working in the neighborhood, with how to get ideas for how to apply some of the things that they're testing within the neighborhood. But that's our plan for this work. Old Northampton, we've got the 3 right now. We're working on acquiring some others, but that'll be probably a new construction first and then some rehab. Show the next slide. We've got a variety of strategies. We've actually been working with the neighborhood too in each of these areas. As I mentioned, we do work in neighborhoods. We don't just go and do the houses. We work with the people as well. So my staff has gone and been working with this neighborhood. We've revitalized a neighborhood watch in that neighborhood, going from a couple people who said, yeah, I'm interested, to 20 people running a group on their own in the last year. So we're really excited to see that leadership start to evolve. But we're hoping to hear from them about some other ways that we can support, or there's some other opportunities. Next slide. And that's a range of approaches that we're using. Our partners at the table, so Work Program Architects is the architects that's working with us. Habitat is working with us on this next program. Next slide. And so I mentioned curb appeal earlier. Our newest program is Rock the Block. And what we've learned, we tested it at Old Northampton for a round. We've been working with Habitat on this. So it actually is a Habitat for Humanity program through our housing authority, who's a partner in that. And they are offering up to $20,000 for homes within that neighborhood for renovations on the exterior of the home. And that's for a homeowner, it's a 10% match, and for an investor, it's a 50% match. Our previous curb appeal program, we found people would come back year after year because they couldn't get all the work done in one project. So they'll go get a roof, and then they go do landscaping. It wasn't having the impact that we wanted to see. So we were basically putting all that impact in one grant cycle as much as possible. And also costs have gone up. So $5,000 doesn't get you what it did back when we were doing that. So we've expanded that program. Habitat did the first round in Old Hampton. We had 16 projects go through and did a great job in those homes that were there. I think they averaged about $15,000 on each home. Next slide. Give us some examples. This is Fordham, the first round that we did in Fordham. This was on Shelton Road. Fixing the roof line, the entryway into the home. We do some advising around the project, some guidelines. It has to be visible to the street, has to meet, obviously meet code and all those things, but it has to be something that's going to be attractive. So we do some coaching with the homeowner to try to get something that's going to be more attractive in the neighborhood. Next one. And this is further in the neighborhood. A lot of, if you know Fordham pretty well, there's a parking challenge because nobody had real driveways. They had the strips, and I won't tell all the story, but they don't all park on their own property either, just because the way the lots lay out, the way the houses sit on those lots. So don't check with your neighbor, you might be parking on their property. But this is one of the challenges that we found, so we've been trying to find ways to put parking into the neighborhood in a more organized way. Next one. So I shared, this is the last Fordham round from last year. We had 10 projects go through. The homeowner has to give a 10% copay, but we had $16,000 in grants given out per home on average, and so the city's put in $172,000 in the neighborhood. We're seeing not just our grants, we're seeing people start to, we're getting the keeping up with the Joneses effect. So we've done our projects, we're seeing the neighbors like, oh, I can do that too, or I can do this, I've been waiting to do that, and now they're encouraged to do that. So that's really our hope at the end of this, is to get that investment going. We have our current cycle underway right now. We've got 12 projects that have just been reviewed a couple weeks ago, so they're working with the homeowners now to get those contracts going and getting our renovators in. So we need contractors for this program. We need contractors for our regular housing authority programs as well. So if you have a contractor that's interested in being a part of this program, please let us know. They're looking for a pool of folks. And this cycle is underway now. I'm sure we're going to need some for the next cycle and the next year. Next slide. So let me talk about the future real quick, and I'll wrap this up. Home stretch. Next slide. So again, the 6 areas that we're working in, so we're hoping, we're actually going to be undertaking a housing study in the next year. Council appropriated funds for us to do a comprehensive housing study to look at where should we be investing? What does that look like? What's it mean for each of these areas? And what does it mean in the context of the region? The Regional Hampton Roads Planning District Commission is also doing a regional housing study that's underway now, so we're hoping that we'll be able to complement each other in that work and really get some answers, get some data to back up what we think we know. That's really what a housing study will be able to do. Next slide. So we think of these 7 areas. We've been doing, I mentioned some strategic planning. We've had some community engagements over the last year, and I pulled out kind of these 4 areas as what I would call kind of critical to our success in the future. These are the areas that we're really looking at. Obviously, there's a range of areas beyond this that, from safety and other things that are important, but if I were to summarize kind of from a development and infrastructure and investment perspective, these are the 4 areas I would be considering. The first one is emerging industries. So everything from logistics to automation. If you know, we've got a drone company on Fort Monroe. We've got looking at how do we really take what's NASA working on and privatize some of those products coming out of NASA. How do we help businesses take those on? So that's really been important to us, is looking at how do we make sure Hampton is staying ahead of the economy when it comes to industries within our region. And then diversifying our urban cores. I mentioned that earlier. How do we make sure that our housing within our downtowns, our Coliseum and Phoebus, are really keeping up with demand? So if we were maxed out, I know Monroe Gates, for instance, in Phoebus is maxed out. What's that mean for our Phoebus? That's great. There's demand there. We know we need more to be able to maintain the commercial that's down in there. That's not enough to sustain that wholly. So how do we make sure we're strategic about that? It's not about just high rises going in. It's about finding what a lot of planners call the missing middle. Those 6-unit apartments, those smaller kind of opportunities. That's a zoning issue, that's a building issue, that's a finance issue, a lot of other things. So stay tuned for that. A lot in our region are looking at that. How do we diversify our urban core so we're getting some density and creating some opportunities that aren't just large developments, multi-million-dollar developments. Increasing tourism. So we mentioned that earlier about Buckrow, the push for sports tourism with our Aquaplex and other opportunities. Fort Monroe as a national monument. Please don't forget that. We have a national monument within our community. A great opportunity around history that we continue to explore. And then Buckrow and our Bayfront. If you're talking short-term rentals, you're probably talking Buckrow, honestly, or you're probably talking about Fort Monroe. These are great opportunities that are driving those interests, and so we need to continue to think about how do we do that well. We only have so much money to go around as tax dollars and federal dollars, so where do we invest that's going to have the biggest impact? And the last one I mentioned is really public placemaking and reinvestment. We've had a great push from council and our manager's office and our staff to really find ways. If you look at the Buckrow boardwalk improvements, $6 million improvements in the boardwalk. Another investment going into the playground, looking at how do we make those places special. If we build it, we got to maintain it. So how do we make sure it looks great down the road? How do we make sure we continue to reinvest in those areas? So a lot of good opportunities coming down the road. So those are the 4 areas. If you're thinking about Hampton, think about these. This is what's coming up, and we're continuing to look for opportunities to move forward. Next. So my 2 questions. I talked a lot. Ready to hear from you all. If we were to do one or either those 4 things or something else, what do you say is critical to Hampton's success when it comes to our success in the future, 2024 beyond, 2045 and beyond? Long term. Okay.
Have those pictures of the model block?
I don't hear the designs. Yeah, I don't have those with me. Sorry.
Can you send them to me?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The designs that they have for the model block are pretty amazing. I'll post them in the Facebook group,
Yep.
but they're like very futuristic and it blends in with the neighborhood so it doesn't take away. So I'll put those up there so y'all can see them.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so one of the things, I'll give an example on the Bay 517, the one that we just got permitted. So in instance, putting a facade that actually extends out in front of the house. So using something that actually hides the rain barrel that we're putting in, that's a resiliency feature. So looking at porches and lights and things that are going to be much more, that's our modern one. Our upward renovation is much more traditional and fits that traditional feel. And our 428, which is our new construction, has those modern features blended in a bit more in the new construction. So
when you were talking about that, and Kim brought it up, you've got models and designs. Are
Yep.
those things that you'll share with us? So if we were investing in that area and we said, hey, I've got this house, I want to use one of your 3 designs.
So I have construction documents that the architects have. They'll be available to everyone. So if you're renovating just the basic house like 517 and you want to do the eve improvements, they'll have that in that construction document. They'll also have the new construction. Hopefully we're not doing many new constructions, but if we have to, you'll have a new construction that'll fit within that neighborhood. The upward construction, those are all available. So they'll also have, as I mentioned, council, and their wisdom in this funded this to give us contract money for the consultant to support investment in that neighborhood. So if someone wants to do that, they will consult with you while we're there. So if you say, hey, I've got these eaves, how do I do that? They'll look at your house and say, let's figure out how to do that. They may not do all the construction documents for you, but they'll at least give you that guidance and give you that extra step up.
Right, and that's in Fordham and which other?
So right now we're doing Fordham. Next year we hope to be in Old Northampton. So we'll be starting that work probably in the spring. We've got the properties. We're working on the infill buildings in here in the near
Might
future.
have to get out and start driving for dollars
I know.
in Fordham this week.
So Fordham, we're really focused, as I mentioned, from Shelton to Ford Street. So that's kind of the core area that we're focused in. Yes, ma'am.
yeah, there's been some areas.
Here we go, hang on a second.
Oh, sorry.
This will help everybody.
Yeah. Yes, I own a rental home on Union Street in
Yep.
Hampton, and running perpendicular, I can't think of the name of that street, but there's a large lot there that the city owns, and it's been there just sitting empty. So, like if an investor wants to buy that lot and build a house on it, does the city ever sell those
So,
lots?
good question. Actually, I'm going to answer what you asked earlier, or opportunity you mentioned earlier, and that. So if you have any interest in properties the city owns, or you want to sell properties to the city, you have a lot, say, hey, before I go put this out to everybody else, I want to ask that the city wants it, the housing authority. So please contact Yvonne Hodges at our housing authority. She's our redevelopment manager over there. They can take in unsolicited proposals, so that if you've got an interest in the property, you can mention them. They'll help you navigate that unsolicited proposal process. So, hey, I want to take this property that you've got and turn it into something else. They'll be able to answer those questions. Or if you want to sell as well. Yes.
So,
Here we go, help us out. Help us out. They can't hear you in the back.
all right, so, there's been a lot of building of new construction, and they're humongous houses, which don't necessarily fit anymore. Is zoning lightening up on that and allowing maybe smaller houses that are more suitable?
Yeah, and I think I'm not the zoning person, and I mentioned you probably should have the zoning person here because they can give you more of the. My interest is in the holistic neighborhood project, but I think yes, the challenge of what we try to build. Generally, when I hear that question, I say, "Who built it?" Because what I find is it's not us. There's some that we build that are larger, and we're usually doing that on a larger lot, 45-foot lot or wider, that we'll build it. So we're not building kind of really cramming in next to a small lot. But the goal is really to find that sweet spot that fits in the character of the neighborhood, and I think that's the challenge. I do think there's still a bias, and I'm curious of your all's thoughts, who are the ones investing and selling to people in the community, of a desire for a larger home, and not necessarily a tiny home and not necessarily a McMansion, as you call it, but what's that sweet spot for square footage that you're seeing in the community? I think that's what we're looking for as well. That's feedback.
1,300 square feet.
Okay.
With a garage.
Okay. Good to know.
But I mean, what you're looking for as far as the price too, that's the problem. You start going like, she's talking 2,400, 2,500 square feet, and you're looking, the first time homebuyer can't afford that.
Yeah, so we're actually running into that now with our housing authority on some lots on the west end of Queen Street that we had purchased over by Patterson, where the designs we had rezoned 3 years ago, I think, that we're now finally getting to build. Yeah, it's not affordable. And so how do we we can't give a land grant, there's a lot of things we can't even do to get it down to be affordable. So we're having to look at, do we redesign the home, or some of the ways we can approach that, land trust or other things really outside the box. So that's our challenge, is find that sweet spot of affordability, but also creating more opportunity as well. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe some of them bigger properties you can develop into co-living properties.
Yeah, and that's been a long conversation on the staff side. I was out on a call, I was sharing with Councilwoman Harper. I was on a call this morning with some of our other cities, housing people around the state, because I think it's Roanoke. I think it's Roanoke. I know Charlottesville's done this, where they're actually not zoning single family anymore. They've removed that from their zoning code, so you can only do 2 or more on their lots. I don't think that's going to happen in Hampton, so you didn't hear that from me. Yeah, but that is the movement that we're seeing across the state for cities, and so I think creating more opportunities for duplex, 2 lots, accessory dwelling units, those kind of opportunities that densify without over-densifying a neighborhood, I think is going to be what we're looking at in this comprehensive plan update. Yeah.
Yeah, and that wasn't my
Sorry, go ahead.
question.
Thanks for that. Good point.
Yeah, my question was, the grants that you guys are offering, is that the same thing as what we used to call opportunity zones, or opportunity zones, where, hey, you come in and you build here, develop here, you get a tax break, or you get dollars?
Those are different.
Same.
Yeah, those are different. So these are direct grants. So these are not tax-based. So these are not tax. So there's a couple different tax programs that work towards housing development. So low-income housing tax credits that the state runs, and then opportunity zones, which I think Go Virginia is the one that handles that in the state. Those are really folks that we have. Kind of the northern part of downtown up through Magruder, Coliseum and Magruder are part of our opportunity zones. We really haven't seen, I've been interested, I have a staff person that's really keyed into opportunity zones. We really haven't seen someone take advantage of that. It has to be a rental property, so there's an income generating property. So it could be commercial or rental or something along those lines. But it's a more complex deal. And I think we just haven't seen anybody. We've seen the South Side do a couple of those, but it's not been something, at least on the peninsula, I've seen. If you know more, let me know. I'm curious to see how that goes. Yeah. Other questions? What's critical that you think that we should be focused on that I'm missing? That you say, hey, don't miss this?
You said that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You said that, I think I'm loud enough.
Here.
You said that you were gonna put a gate in, for the water rising and things like that. If you're able to do that, and you're lifting some of the streets and things like this, will any of those homes come out of a flood zone into something that's affordable for people that need affordable housing?
Yeah, good question.
Without the
So
insurance?
our emergency management team is also one that does the elevation program. So our emergency management team does the elevation program. Us just creating barriers for tide gate or tidal systems is not going to elevate your home. So it's not going to elevate the land. So FEMA controls that flood requirement. So if it's still below that 8-foot threshold, you're going to have to you're going to have to pay the flood insurance
Will
fees.
there be grants, like I've seen some houses be lifted?
Mm-hmm.
And so are those available to
Yep.
investors as well as?
I don't know about that, so that's a good question. I'll have to go back and see. I know emergency management team's the one that handles the elevation program, and that may be something we look at in the future of advocating for. I think that's a state program that the State Department of Emergency Management manages, but that's something we can maybe advocate at the state level as a way to maybe encourage elevation, where homeowners may not be able to do that. An investor may see an opportunity that makes that more viable. So thank you for that. Yes.
This might be related to hers, but like the Old Buck Road area.
Yep.
I heard that the city was supposed to understand for the Old Buck Road area, it floods quite a bit. I have a property over there. The understanding I thought was the city was coming in and supposed to be putting in a drainage system to relieve that.
Yeah,
Is that the case, and what's the timeline?
So part of
Yeah.
that downtown water plan is to identify what are the projects that are important to mitigate flooding in those areas. So what are the problems? Some of this work our Public Works Department is doing already. So if there's, I'll give an example of one. There's a project that they're at, I think 80 or 90% design over on Gloucester in the Wythe area. So way over towards the old Virginia school site, kind of very into the community over there. That's been in the works and planning for a while, 10 or 15 years. I think they finally now have the design work, they got the money in place to get going. So they're always working to improve the stormwater system in some ways. I think if it's a tidal issue, then our resiliency team is probably looking at it, but I would have to, if you gave me more information on the site, maybe afterwards I can look into it and see what they're doing.
The neighborhood centers and what they're doing with those.
Yeah, so Hampton is unique in a lot of ways because we've taken our community centers and we have several community centers that we continue to have, but we really like the idea of neighborhood centers. And these are centers that are run by the neighborhood. They have leadership by the neighborhood, a nonprofit that supports the neighborhood, the work that's going on in that center. So I was a part of both the last two and really helping set up those nonprofits that run those neighborhoods. Fox Hill is one that's over there, that off Hall Road, and that was we were looking at replacing an old what was over in the Grunland site. They had an old facility there that got destroyed in the tornado, and so we were looking at a replacement for that. And the church became available. The city purchased it, rehabbed the church, and built a gym on there. Now the neighborhood is running a nonprofit out of there. The city staff some Parks and Rec support, but they're running the nonprofit that's programming everything. So they actually have a neighbor sharing opportunity. So if you're staffing one of those events and activities, you get credits for your event or activity in that space. So it's a really neat kind of resource sharing opportunity that the neighborhood has created there. And it's really booming. They continue to have activities and programming. The athletic association's working out of there. The next one I mentioned was Mary Jackson Neighborhood Center. And both of these were planned and built at the same time. One got ahead a little bit because it had an existing building and the other one was kind of empty space. But Mary Jackson is just now starting their nonprofit. And they've got some Parks and Rec programming that's been happening for the last year and a half. they're hoping to get some added programming through that nonprofit in the next year. So it's a really neat model. YH Thomas is another one that's over in Old Northampton. So we're going to be working with them once we get over there, as well as the Little England Cultural Center over on Kickintan Road. So those are our neighborhood centers who have not kind of community leadership leading those, not just city staff.
Find that the housing shortage is more relevant.
Yes, with more need for housing, in Hampton. I know over 10 years ago, y'all had a program for first-time homeowners in Hampton. Like if y'all bought a house and brought it up to par, then you would sell it to like someone that was going to live in Hampton for at least 2 years. And then didn't you have like a homeownership grant to give them?
Yeah, so we had a down
Do
payment.
y'all still offer that?
Yeah, so we have so through our home program that the federal HUD gives us, we have a down payment assistance program. So we do have that we provide. It's primarily for those who are buying homes that the housing authority owns, and so that's how that's being operated, or that they're reselling.
So with the crunch in housing, y'all
Yeah.
are still able to find these houses to renovate and make offer it at an affordable
Yeah,
price?
as I mentioned, the ones that we're working on Grant Street or on Queen Street is a challenge. We have one lined up for that. We're trying to build the home, but the cost is becoming so that down payment assistance wouldn't even make that gap happen. So we're
Because they're on
working through
Queen
that
Street
now.
across from Patrick Henry Hardware. Is that
Yeah.
big block of land? Is that where y'all are going to build?
So we are entertaining unsolicited proposals for that site. So if someone has a proposal for, I think it's 26 lots in that area is what we've been able to, with our architect concept out. You can come out with your own concept if you got a better concept for that area, but you can always submit an unsolicited proposal for that area, and we'll be moving that forward.
Where is that?
Queens River and Back River, or Queens River and Queen Street and Back River, sorry.
Are y'all open to doing like, say, multi-family houses there, or you want it single family?
So the neighborhood, because again, that neighborhood in particular, we planned with the neighborhood, what they would like to see. I think, to the comment earlier, I think there's some comfort in the neighborhood for some duplex opportunities. Multifamily, no, not so much. I think density is a challenge because it sits right in the middle of the neighborhood. As you know, Settlers Landing wasn't the main road. It used to be Queen Street. And so that's why that street really is set up that way. So when Queen Street ran and all the business left Queen Street. And so really densifying that back to a multifamily is not something I think the neighborhood's going to support. So I think that's.
But I mean that lot right across from Patrick
Yeah.
Hardware.
Yeah, and I would just say because there was a multifamily there and we ended up taking it down, I don't think the neighborhood wants to see that go back. So, yeah.
Other than, I know there's the weatherization program, and that's not necessarily senior specific, but do you have senior specific programs for housing or housing improvements or anything like that? Something that's senior specific.
We don't have any programs that are limited just to seniors. So our programs tend to be in neighborhoods where we see, like I mentioned, model block. A lot of our participants tend to be seniors because it's an older neighborhood. The homeowners in that neighborhood tend to be older. We were just talking actually beforehand about our federal programs. In the last year, our housing authority has had 70 projects, I think, underway in just the last year with our federal programs. We had some old money that we had moved forward, and council supported that effort. We actually added some housing authority staff to make that happen. So we really got aggressive in trying to spend down that money and get it into the homes where it needed to be. And so they've also added some city money to create a critical repair program. So while we're doing these federal programs, they take 6 to 9 months from time somebody applies to the time we can actually get it project done, through all the paperwork and the bidding and so forth. If someone has a HVAC issue, that's an HVAC issue today, not 9 months from now. So the critical repair program is to fix those urgent issues so that that house is habitable for that time. So they've been working with that as pairing those monies together. We're looking at other funds. Again, I was on a state call today to talk about housing rehabilitation. We've applied for some senior grant funds from HUD. We didn't get that last year. We're looking for some other opportunities that are specific to seniors though.
Yeah, because what I've found, I've done a lot of work with senior citizens, is there's a big disconnect.
Yeah.
Probably most of us in here can get online, find programs, get around, they're not behind a walker, still drive, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But senior citizens get very disconnected and they don't know about the program.
Yeah.
They don't know about the people or the help they can get to come in and make their home continue to be livable.
Yeah.
So when I was working with the folks, literally we were trying to get a program in place to have another small department in social services that was a senior outreach department that was checking on the most probable. You have data and statistics on people all over the place. You can check on the most probable people that would need to be connected to senior citizens, but it falls right into the housing.
And
I don't know how many houses that should have been condemned that I went into the senior citizens were living in. And
Yeah.
it's just bad.
I don't want to take all the council's thunder, just since you're here, you're picking on you. But council in this last year also funded some work around poverty study. So they've been doing some of that research. That research is leading to some staffing that's going to be focused on how to address those who are financially challenged. And a lot of that comes into our senior population. That ownership number looks great, it's a nice blue number, but there's challenges within that 70, 80%, as you mentioned, because seniors typically own their home, but they may not have the funds to continue to reinvest in that home as it gets older and older. And so we're trying to find some other resources to be able to put towards those specific issues. So I agree with you. It's a challenge. I think, again, our federal funds, we have a wait list still of another 150 people that we continue to add money to try to chip away at. So we're with you. The need outpaces the dollars. There's benefits, and I've shared this before with our seniors. I want seniors in our neighborhoods. They protect the fabric of our community. We want them to stay in their home as long as possible. But we also have a need for more senior housing in our city. Senior facilities, senior supports that are not just, put grandma away or put grandpa away. It's housing that's of dignity in places that we really that they really want to be, that are within their neighborhoods. So we're working on that too, of finding ways that we can put senior housing within communities. Old Northampton's one that identified that. We got a property out there that we're looking at putting out in the near future that's focused on senior housing in particular. Yeah, maybe just a couple more questions. We're almost at 8:30, so I don't want to go too long. Yeah.
Didn't you just put in a new big senior, is it called the Arbors there on Pembroke? That
So-
real fancy building.
Yeah, so that was a private project.
Private
Yeah,
project?
council approved the zoning on that one, but yeah, that's a nice senior.
So-
It was already leased up before they even opened the door. I think they were at 100% leasing.
So that's people paying for their own
Yes.
rent to live there for seniors?
Yes, it's 55 and older, restricted housing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
and they're
thought
the
that was
same-
maybe federal funded, but that's private.
No, they were the same ones that, just like the Woodlands, same kind of project. Yeah, Phoebus. I have one last question. Maybe I can get a couple. Can I answer yours real quick? But just ask my question, then I'll get yours. Okay?
Oh, you're gonna ask me?
I'm gonna ask my question. I'll get yours.
Sorry.
I didn't get to my second question, and I really want to know, how can we partner as investors in the city? Because I know I shared earlier, I know it's a market issue, and I don't want us competing in the market and hurting ourselves. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't help the neighborhood. So my thought is, and I'll throw this out there, and I want you to give me your ideas. You know the areas we're working in. How can we be better partners as investors and as a city, or the housing authority? And I'll
Is
go to your
there an
question.
email list that you can get on this, or we can get on that we send out properties?
So they can hear you in the back too.
That you send emails to investors that sign up for it, that can help you flip one of those houses for
Okay.
seniors or whatever. So if you have a base that everybody can go to, and the information is there, would help.
Okay.
And then other people, because I'll
Yeah. I'll get your question. Yeah. Okay.
Break my own rule. Break my own rule,
Okay.
which is use the use the microphone, because the microphone helps for you guys in the back, right? Especially when we're
Sorry.
asking questions. Faye and Faye has a very quiet voice, so if she's asking a question, we can't hear it. So yeah, I think something like an email list, something that you're trying, those properties that you're trying to, that you're trying to sell, or you want some help with, some partnership with. I mean, we would, if we had a place we could look, I bet you, we,
If we have a property we want to
Quarterly auction.
offload at the same time.
yeah, we could,
I'll give an example. So Model Block, for instance, we're going to have these homes for about 2 to 3 years in the neighborhood. We're going to be doing programming out of them. We did this in Old Northampton. Again, we learned from what we did in the past. We had a house on Lincoln Street. We had trainings and classes out of there. So we did landscaping classes in the driveway. We did things about how to fix up your windows. So if there's opportunities where lenders or those that help refinance or financing for renovations or those kind of things, you want to partner on that with our housing authority in particular, sponsor something in the home. They're working on a sponsorship package for the furniture, so we can. I was joking. I said we're going to have family photos throughout these homes, and it's going to be all our sponsors. Like hey, and it's good. We're going to have signs and stuff. But it's a way to incorporate that into the story that we tell for this neighborhood, and how we help support the neighborhood of the resources that exist within our community. So
did you mention something earlier about bringing in owners, investors to fix up, to not use the word flip, but to rehab, to talk about the rehab process?
Yeah, so we have a preferred builder program. We also have a contractor pool that the housing authority works with. So if anybody wants to be in any of those pools, the housing authority will work with you to, because they check your paperwork, make sure you're going to work with the federal programs and so forth. But that's an easy way to get involved with the housing authority. We're still looking for contractors. There's a great demand, obviously, right now with everybody doing work. Y'all are having challenges, I'm sure, too. But if you know folks that are willing to do some of that work and already in the neighborhood, that's even better. So I think those.
Yeah, my guess is that there's a lot of us out there that are buying houses. They're buying junkers and they're rehabbing and fixing them up, either holding them or selling them. But yeah, any way that we can
I think the challenge
and
with
find
that-
what you want to sell and fix, getting the word to us is a way to go.
I think one of the challenges with that is if you're a small investor, you don't always hire contractors or licensed contractors. You may be the contractor yourself.
Yeah.
And so then that stops you from getting some of these things, I think, which is a problem.
Okay.
The dollar lot, for example, you've got to use.
Yeah, so,
That's a big project.
and back to the senior thing, I'm gonna ask this, then
Okay,
I'm not
go ahead,
doing anything
take it.
else tonight. So in the block, the grant block, Fordham and all that, you say you just do the outside, but many of those homes, they need to extend the back of the house for laundry area and such. Will the grant support that as well?
So we are working, again, we've been in model block, really in Fordham for the last year, getting the first homes and the designs going, and the Rock the Block program going. My hope, and we've had some internal conversations, and we'll be bringing that to council in the next, as we get these going now, is to talk about interior renovation grant programs, because our federal programs do that, but our city programs don't. So what does that look like so that we can renovate, so you can actually take, okay, I've seen the kitchen that you did, but I ain't got money to do that. So how do I do that in my home? So we can help incentivize and take away some of that burden. We've got to work on that program.
How about
as well
low
as-
interest loans for people?
And that's we've done loans in the past, our housing authority has, that's another option, especially for additions and those kind of things. So stay tuned, we're not quite there yet. We're kind of getting the first hurdle of saying, yeah, we can build in this neighborhood, we can renovate, but that's our next step.
And my last thing is back to senior housing. So baby boomers are the biggest population. None of the investors are building one-level homes, okay? And I got a pet peeve with this because I'm a baby boomer, okay, and bad knees. So I'm telling you, baby boomers have money. Build the one-level home, charge more for it, they will buy it. You build it, they will come, okay? Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Good question. Yeah,
But
good
the
thoughts.
problem with that is, just like he said, there's not enough land to go out, you gotta go up. I mean, if you're gonna,
Yeah.
that's a lot of the problem.
Well, and I think I'll just give a quick solution that we've been looking at too, is how we build duplex, for instance. Doesn't have to be side by side up. It could be like Sussex was, first floor and second floor.
Yeah.
So the first floor really serves your senior needs, and the second floor does, it's for others, or seniors that
That's
have
what
good
I'm
needs.
looking to build.
Yeah.
Are those duplexes, are they gonna be sold as like a condo unit, or are they gonna be rented? Are you gonna own the other
I will just say,
part of
other
the
localities have worked that out. I think we can work it out too, and I think that's the next step.
elevators are expensive.
Yeah, I'll let Scott.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, do you maintain a list of either, I'll say, derelict or dilapidated homes that you would like to see investors like us take care of?
We don't. The state actually gives us power to do a vacant building
Exactly.
registry. We have not taken that on, but that's something we could look at in the future.
Good question, because I noticed,
That just came breaking my rule.
Yeah.
It's just came out, yeah.
well, no, there's two, you just spiked two things, and we're gonna get one more question here when I'm done talking. There were 6,000 unoccupied houses in your
Right.
on your chart.
On your chart, yeah.
On your chart, 6,000 unoccupied, so there is no list for where those 6,000 are and who we can mail to that owns those, is there?
No, because that's census data, so that's, I don't
Okay.
have that, but.
Okay, so
but I
that
would say-
census data, we'd have to skip trace that ourselves.
Yeah,
to
so,
find
and
out
some of that's gonna be multifamily as well, so you're talking all the vacant apartments are in that as well, so it's not just
Okay.
single family, that's all units across the city.
Okay.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I think that's a challenge for us, and in the long run of figuring out, and I would say we would need you all, as I shared this with VPAR, we were talking about infrastructure, and I said, if that's an issue that you all want to take up as investors, we need y'all to back us on that. Because saying a vacant property registry, that means you have to register your vacant property, and that's got to be equal across. We can't just say, well, those other ones that you register, but you don't. That's got to be something we do across, consistently across. And so if that's something that you all feel is important as a step or tool, you need to let us know. So.
And then the next question, based on what you brought up, is there a place where we can get a codes? Because I know I've got rentals that get nailed every now and then because the grass is too long. I get the letter. They get the letter.
Store, yeah.
Yeah, as soon as it gets seeds on the top of it or whatever it is. So is there, what do they call that list? Codes enforcement. Is there? Can we get that in Hampton?
It's online.
It's online already? Oh, okay. Well, very good.
And it's
Thank you very much.
Or Newport News. Newport News, you gotta pay for it.
Okay.
And I would suggest, as I mentioned before, maybe it's good to have our Lex Bethea, as our manager for property maintenance, have him come and give him some hot topics before he
Okay.
comes that he can answer for you all. Like maybe it's grass, maybe it's what can they enforce and can't they? What do they do about rental inspection? We have an rental inspection program that they can also help support with. That supports you as an investor because it gives you a baseline of inspection that when your tenant goes and messes up the property, you've got a legal document from the city that says this is what the property looked like at that time.
Right.
So this is those partnership opportunities. I think we can dive deeper in the future.
Right. Okay. Is there anybody else got something want to grab a hold of the microphone?
So if you could
Who's
click
your
one more
main point of
slide.
contact in the office
Hang on a
for
second.
issues?
Click one last slide.
Who would be the main point of contact in the office to come and talk all these housing issues, or do we just need to come see you?
The last slide has my contact. So, and if it doesn't come up, you can't talk to me. No, talk to somebody else. There you go. There's a link if you want that. I've physical cards if you want them, but that's my my blank digital card if you need it. I would say, depending on what you're looking at. I mean, if you're really talking about affordable housing or again redevelopment activities, I would talk to our housing authority directly. Yvonne Hodges with the Housing Authority, they're the ones implementing those programs and being out there on the day-to-day, working on their grant programs and so forth. If it's broader policy stuff or kind of broad partnership opportunities, come see me. I mean, I think that's kind of how I would divide that, those conversations. And if you got property issues, go see the third floor. Don't go permit issues, go down there at City Hall. But, and Lex and others are great in our staff. They're glad to engage. They're glad to come out. If you've got other community organizations that you want them to come out to, just let us know. I do recommend in the future maybe having our new Economic Development Director, Leonard Sledge, come and speak to you all. I think he can give a good perspective of the development that's happening from a business perspective and a broader sense as well.
Well, I will say, because I've talked to zoning in Hampton and Public Works in Hampton, and all of them have been very helpful.
Wait, I need to record.
Yeah, they're really, I mean, very helpful because there's 7 lots that I was looking at and still looking at developing that doesn't have a road going there yet, but I mean, they've been helpful multiple times that I've called them about. So
Yeah,
I just wanted to let you know.
I just hope you all know, we may not always agree on things, but we have the same goal in mind. We want to see good development in our community. We want to see good success through our investment.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
I didn't get the answer I wanted, but I got good explanation.
You didn't pay for my dinner, but you can give me all the compliments.
But the city's been very helpful.
Yep.
Well, thank you.
And,
Appreciate
you know,
it.
sometimes you don't quite get the answer you want, but they'll tell you why you got the answer.
Well, certainly.
And I will also
Got
say
that.
this, from my experience in other localities, just because what they say today is the rule, 4 or 5 years later, it may completely change.
Yeah.
And the opportunities open up. I've just got something in Gloucester that 4 years ago, well, you can only split it once and it has to go to family members. And they've changed that. You can split it 4 ways, 5 ways, and it doesn't have to go to family members and things like that. So just maintain a relationship with somebody you know at the city and keep doing that. Yeah, Jonathan, thank you very much. I think that was our last one. Good crowd tonight, so we were interested to hear what you had, and you didn't disappoint.
I tried.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll take you up on that.